good, Joy?
Okay, I think we are live.
Okay.
Let me mute. Okay. Um, so welcome to the technical steering committee meeting. And I guess we can get started on the agenda. Um, or if anyone else wants to take over walking through the agenda. Well, I can hope that nobody starts jolling above me. Um, so is there any announcement that people would like to make? I guess we should announce that we have a new security release. So for those who are watching, remember to upgrade. Um, and there's a reminder for people to nominate people for the contributor spotlight. Uh, yes, Matteo is not here, so we probably don't have a board update. Can go through the issues now. The first one is I put this on the agenda, but I think it's probably already resolved. But as an FYI, the Docker images are still they were still missing for the security release because, as far as I can tell, the model builds are still kind of blocking the other images from being published, and for some reason, the unofficial builds were not building the model builds, so they were
They are.
blocking.
The unofficial builds are building the Moodle builds, but because the security updates had V8 changes, they are very slow.
I see.
So each build is taking like 3 hours, and it's all serial. So everything is queued up behind everything else. So I don't think it started like the 20 builds. So I think it's still doing like the 22 builds.
Right, I guess the last time this came up, the general consensus seems to be we should decouple the unofficial missiles with other images so that the others can be pushed ASAP because they are already built with, as
So
part of this
again, I
release.
think we agreed in a past meeting to uh, dissolve the Docker working group, but I don't think we've put anything in place to actually take over the running functionality of it, or at least, we had the responses from members of the working group saying that they didn't feel empowered to make those decisions. So I think we're all in agreement that if the working group is not feel empowered to make the decisions, we need to take it back within like the TSC. But I don't think we've put anything in place. Yeah, no, nothing has actually fundamentally changed in terms of how the processes are set up. So I think we've all got agreement that it should change, but the change hasn't happened because no one yet is doing, taking on the responsibilities of that work, of what was supposed to be delegated to the working group.
Right. I'm not sure what else we can do about this issue other than uh, getting the TSC, but technically people probably don't have the bandwidth to overtake the Docker maintenance, or we probably would need to be, um, I don't know, encourage more volunteers. Um,
Yes, I think so. One of my, I'll need to talk to someone. There might be one or two people I know that might be interested, but I want to double check before outing them in the public like this. And I know there's been a few suggestions of people that do seem to be interested, but I think they were sort of tentative outreaching to them, and they were a little bit hesitant. I don't know. I don't know if it's maybe people are a bit scared of like the responsibility. um, but yeah, I think we do need to find some solution as to how that gets managed. And uh, I mean, maybe it is just the TSC going in and approving things if there are PRs open. But I don't know how many of us are actually up to speed on how the publishing on the Docker side works. Um,
I think in that particular case, it seems to be someone who's already on the Docker team opened the pull request to try to like hot fix it. But has the usual etiquette requires in open source, you need someone else to approve it. If there's nobody else who comes in to approve something, then you're kind of like you're still stuck. So I guess we'll need to try to find a way to at least get like two or more people who are more actively on top of something like this. Because otherwise, like if there's only one person there, unless there's like, well, people can decide to like expedite if it's, emergency, then you don't really need the approval from somebody else, but etiquette.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think ideally, I can't remember if we've actually got a GitHub team for it, but we either need a replacement for the working group or at least a team that could then, we need to staff that with at least two people, or sorry, get at least two volunteers or more. But yeah, there needs to be some something put in place to actually do the I say day to day, I don't know how much time it will actually take up, but there is at least some bit of work to do the decoupling, which we all think will be the best way to get the security releases out faster.
okay, I guess that's this much FYI that we need for the meeting. We can probably move on to other items. The follow-up will probably need to happen on GitHub anyway. Um, the next one is runtime duplicate module register. So Jeffrey is not in the meeting, but I think I can probably explain what this is because we were discussing why this progress was opened. So module register, which was the off-thread asynchronous module hooks were kind of considered like there are some design flaws that kind of prevent it from being working correctly in many cases, which we documented. But they are kind of part of the design, so you cannot really fix them easily. So we currently have another API that's like synchronous and in thread. So that resolves a lot of issues that came with the previous design. And I have a proof of concept package that can allow you to kind of ponyfill the async worker, the async module loading hooks with the existing the synchronous one. So that means the previous one could technically just be deprecated if you can ponyfill that with the other API. Uh, maybe not like entirely, there's some limitations, but it's mostly working for most use cases, I guess, except certain situations where you need specific things. So Jeffrey and I was discussing to deprecate the modular API because there's a bunch of maintenance burden that came with it. There's like for example two implementation of required technically in the module loader, and one of them goes through the asynchronous pipeline. Um, and this one has a lot of quirks that makes it behave differently from the normal require. And this thing adds a lot of like extra code that kind of just behaves differently and you need to watch out in the module loader. So from a maintenance point of view, it would be better to like deprecate it so that we and eventually remove it so that we do not need to like think about it whenever we change anything in the module loader. Um, so that's basically the motivation of this. And the proposal was to um, dock deprecate it for now. And then for 26, maybe if we can make it 26.0 or some early 26 version before it hits LTS, we emit a warning for those who are using it. But for 25 and below, we will not have warnings because this is used quite widely by a lot of popular packages, even though it was experimental. Um, So the pull request that you've open, just make it doc deprecated. And I think I don't know where we were at. I think previously Antoine was blocking because it's technically uh well, it's kind of in a gray area where whether we can deprecate a experimental feature or like by definition they are not. They're just experimental, so you do not deprecate them. Um, but it seems Antoine is no longer blocking. Uh, but I'm not sure where we stand currently. Um, oh, this is another program. This one is for the runtime deprecation. And I guess it's mostly FYI, right? For the TSC to be aware that we are runtime deprecating this.
Antoine is waiting to be promoted. Maybe we can have Antoine's words.
I am not sure I'm seeing anyone who looks like Antoine in the
I
there's like
think the
someone who's
iPhone.
I tried to promote
Antoine's
iPhone,
okay.
but iPhone declined. So oh okay, they accepted.
Thank you. Yeah, the block for the doc deprecation is it's experimental features. We should not use deprecation for that. I think it's fine if we wait, like if we leave the API on 26 to be less breaking basically, and wait for next year 27 to actually remove it. Yeah, the block I have is just we should not be using a doc deprecation for this. The experimental features, they're supposed to come and go, and we should not use the deprecation number and use because deprecated features they still they adhere to some ver, right? So if we move it to deprecated, it's the same as if we moved it to stable. We could not land the runtime deprecation without a some ver major, or at least it's weird to land a runtime deprecation, in my opinion, without it being a some ver major.
Paolo has his hand up.
Yeah, just a question. So if I got it correctly, since it's not considered stable because I see that it's in active development, we could technically, I'm just making an assumption here, we could technically just remove it out of the blue and don't care about it strictly in theory. I mean, we don't want to break anybody. Which means that if we instead just choose to issue a warning that is gonna go away in the next, like in 27, it should be fine. We are not breaking any rule, right?
Zhenzhong?
Well, yeah, I think the concern currently with the module register is that that's the only widely used module loader API, potentially like in like TSX and in most module loaders that's being currently used. So if we remove it like without any warning and in a short period, that could trigger. I feel like it's not a friendly migration notice to the community.
I get that. I get that. But my question was, we could technically do that. We don't need to do the full doc deprecation and I don't want to do that. I'm just understanding the process for the record. I'm just trying to understand how it works.
Yeah, I feel like the purpose of this doc deprecation and then runtime deprecation is to push people to move to the new module.register hooks API in a reasonable time, rather than saying we suddenly declare that we are going to remove the module register and give no period grace period for people to migrate. I think this is the purpose of the deprecation, and like we have all these deprecation cycles for this purpose.
Yeah, I think the deprecation is mostly trying to give people a more explicit heads up because, for example, if you use certain tooling, they will like mark, if you use a deprecated API, they will like have some, cross this out when you see it in the editor, that kind of thing. So there are some tooling that will help you identify, or try to help people, like discourage people from using deprecated APIs. So if we mark it as 0, we kind of get that help. Otherwise, if we keep it as 1 point something, I'm not sure whether the tools will recognize. So that's like the doc deprecation aspect. The warning will, send the actual thing that, regardless of how you run this, you will not be able to miss. The doc deprecation is mostly for the tools to recognize and nudge people away from this. Or at least like people will not write new code that use this. Paolo?
So, okay, I get your point, Joey, but like Shenzong was correctly pointing out, unless for a very specific case, and for instance, Platformatic is one of those, we use the register API and I will migrate to a new version. My take is that if we do the doc deprecation, it's gonna be close to be useless because it's not an API which is typically used by most users, but rather, like Shenson pointed out, from tools like TSX, that users don't even check the documentation. So maybe directly show warning saying this is going away in the next version will force eventually issue report on TSX or similar tools and eventually force people to switch to the new version. Otherwise, it's gonna be close to be useless.
I think the point that we do document deprecation at the first step is that it won't bother users who use these libraries because, I mean, they are using a legit transpiling libraries like TSX or like importing in the middle, and they are not usually these users receiving the warnings might not be the actual users who write this code. So they'll have to wait until this code, these libraries to migrate to the module register hooks, and this migration might take time, might take some time to happen. And I don't think we want to frighten these users, like say they're using a library that's using deprecated APIs for some reasons. So that's why I would say that doc deprecate first to give this library owner a signal that you should move to the module register hooks in a reasonable time period. And then in the I think the plan is that in 26 we are going to say emit a new runtime deprecation warnings because 26 is a new version anyway. So that people using 26 will receive a warning say now you should move to the new API. But for versions lower than like 25, which were released already, people do not upgrade to 26, they will still be able to use the current libraries and the current APIs without receiving a frightening warning about deprecation. So I think the purpose of this procedure was that the module register, even if it's been experimental for a long time, it has been used in very broad libraries. And we need to give people time to migrate.
My short take on giving people time to migrate is they're gonna just to waste it, to be honest. That's my experience so far. No matter how much time you give them, they're always late, which is fine, probably.
Yeah, I think that's the point that we are going to emit the warning in 26, but not emit the warning in versions lower than 25.
I get that. Yeah, I totally get that. So you're saying that you want to issue a warning on 26 and doc deprecate for 26 and lower, basically for each version, basically to 26 and 20. I mean, 25 is going end of life in a month, so I guess 24 and 22.
Yeah.
Right.
Ah, sounds fair to me.
I think the dot deprecation is mostly for library authors who write new code because even to this day, some people when they try to write, when they want to customize, they would like default by default because they know this exists, they would by default reach out to module registrar. If you don't give them a clear signal that, oh, things has changed, please don't use this. Like you need some more explicit signal that what you think that would be safe to use in the past a few years has not changed, and you no longer should use this. Then people will still write new packages that depend on it.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, I'm fine with that.
I think Antoine's concern is mostly about the procedure concern, right? Like we should not issue Docker deprecation or deprecation at all for experimental for experimental APIs.
Yeah. So the idea is I would not want the deprecation number to, that they're gonna stick around. We keep them forever, the deprecation numbers. So I think it doesn't really make sense to use them for experimental features because when we actually get rid of the experimental features, there should be no trace left, ideally. So I just don't think the deprecation is the right tool for that.
Philip?
Thanks. I'd like to point out that there are existing dep numbers for removals of experimental APIs. So we've done this in the past.
By any chance, are we closing to exhaust the deprecation number scheme that we use? I don't think so, right? We use the 3D digits and we are plenty of them yet.
Yeah, I feel like in principle, maybe yes, we don't usually use deprecations for experimental features, but it kind of depends on like how well this is used in practice. I think for module registrar, which kind of have been treated as stable by a lot of people effectively, it kind of warrants a deprecation because of the reality. Or like we probably need to make an exception for this. Probably not for every experimental feature, but for things that actually get picked up by the community as if it's stable, we kind of have to be pragmatic.
Well, if I may, actually, maybe the point here is slightly different. I mean, I both agree with Antoine that saying that we should not waste deprecation number on experimental features, and I both agree with Jenson that we should probably issue that warning because it's a widely used feature. Which brings to the next problem. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this feature has been experimental for how long? At least 3 years now, or something, right? So maybe the problem should be that we should not keep a feature experimental for so long, especially if we see that there is wide adoption. We should at some point say either we consider this stable or we strongly discourage the usage, which makes no sense, to be honest. So I would say after a while we have to reevaluate if a feature is still considered to be stable, sorry, experimental or stable, or just treat it as stable because there is a wide adoption in the community and we can basically move it away in one day like it is today.
I think there are sort of two kind of like the experimental features can kind of get stuck, but there are kind of like two types of state. One of them is like nobody is actively trying to push it. I think the trace events are kind of in that category. The other one is that there are some flaws within the design and it's challenging. Things like module hooks and async hooks, there are like some flaws, and people are exploring alternatives. And while the alternatives is like formalizing that the other thing is still there because it's the practical solution for what people are looking for. Um, so yeah, it'll it'll probably be useful to have some kind of like new category of stability indexes.
Wow.
But I guess that's more of a long-term discussion we should have for, for generally this category of things.
Okay.
So just a quick word about the trace event module. The reason that it's being kept as a experimental was that it depends on a V8 dependency, which is called Perfecto, and we don't want to mark it as stable before we fully move to the new tracing system in V8. And that's the reason that it's been experimental for a very long time. And I'm not sure if this is the same, it could be categorized as the same reason as module loaders. But yeah, it is expanded for a very long time.
No, Shensekono, don't get me wrong. I get the technical reason for keep the module as experimental because you don't consider it's finished, stable enough, or totally supported, and so forth. My only take was that if you think that removing an experimental module might break the community, then you should also at the same time probably do not consider that module as experimental because too many people are relying on that to treat as an experimental. In other words, to make an example, if not many people are using the SQLite module, which I don't think is the case, but just naming one, then you can say, okay, I treat this as experimental, I deprecate, I do whatever I want, fine. But if you're talking about the register module, which is, sorry, the module system, the register call, which is pretty widely used, then you can, even though you consider as an experimental and not feature complete, you cannot treat it as an experimental for the sole reason that we shouldn't be having this discussion over that. Otherwise, we could just say experimental, we remove it, fine. That's my take. Even though there are technical reasons for that I'm not absolutely against. I agree with you on that, but I'm just saying that we are giving the community probably a conflicting message, I guess. Mm.
Yeah, and I could add to that that I fully agree. Like if we choose to mark it as deprecated, then it's a saying, or then it's a stable feature actually, even though we're getting rid of it, which is fine. But then it's a conscious decision that it's no longer an experimental API.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, if I can be even bolder, I would say that every time we cut off a major version, we should reevaluate all the experimental and say, shall we promote this, shall we promote this, and so forth. That's something I would probably introduce as a process. Otherwise, we probably forget about it.
I think the other solution is to clarify what deprecation means. That we can also use deprecations for experimental things as a mechanism to give warning. Because that we actually have done that before with, for example, some async APIs. So to like not mix the messaging, like it's not moved to deprecation because it was stable. It's moved to deprecation because deprecation is the tool we use to warn people.
By deprecation, you mean the warning deprecation or the doc deprecation?
The deprecation process, like, assigning a code and stuff. It's like
Well,
just, warning.
I mean, first of all, I would also say that we have to. I mean, first thing is that since we released the release cycle, we might even have to reevaluate this cycle because previously was considering two semver measure per year. Now it's just once, which means that you might be even waiting more, probably, or not. I got lost in the new release cycle, but I wonder if he's actually prolonging too much now with the new two major release cycle.
I think there's no formal policy that tie the deprecation with a single major cycle. It's more like you could, for this one in particular, we're thinking about doc, we're thinking about runtime deprecate is 26, and then we will remove it in 27. But it does not necessarily need to be 26.0 because people don't adapt people don't adopt 26.0 the moment it's out. So you have like a wiggle room between 26 and 26 LTS. So you can like use that like as soon as possible, but in a very early version, you can start emitting warning without disrupting people because people have to upgrade to see the warning. So that's the idea of how we do this. I think that
I,
can also be, sorry.
I think we have maybe some precedent that some exception that we did and runtime warning in like not the .0.0 but maybe the .1.0, but I think that the official policy is no, it's a server major to emit a runtime warning, and not for experimental stuff because it's outside of the server, but I think it would be an exception to land a runtime warning on a non-experimental API.
Okay.
I guess is basically I guess the idea is whether this warrant an exception, I guess. I think for this one I would grant a exception because it's exceptional compared to other experimental features. Well, maybe like not everyone, but like this is pretty exceptional. I would say async hooks is probably somewhat exceptional. There are like a lot of experimental features that we might not treat with as much care. But for things that are widely used, I think the exception can be warranted.
I agree.
But then do you agree that it's no longer an experimental feature if it goes through a deprecation cycle?
I think they're not mutually exclusive. You can also deprecate a experimental feature.
I think that what Paolo was saying is right. Like if we think it's changing this API could break the ecosystem, so we don't want to change it without accepting server major. But that's basically the definition of something that's not experimental. Effectively we treat it as a stable feature that we're getting rid of.
I think there's a fine line between what kind of breakage counts as server major. Like for example, these kind of hooks are developed to replace monkey patching. You can also say any changes that break monkey patching is also uh, breaking enough to warrant a warning, but it does not mean like for example module wrap is obviously not something we can put in. We definitely do not want to put that into anything stable, but is effectively, it has to go through a deprecation cycle. It's like it's not even documented, but it's like even worse than experimental. It's not even documented, but we still deprecate them. So that kind of, backs my point about like experimental and deprecation they're not like mutually exclusive. We even deprecate undocumented things. Why would experimental things be, you know, uh, more 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 trustworthy than undocumented things, right?
I guess the point is that for things that we deem that deserve a deprecation cycle, or the one that we consider stable after the fact, such as those undocumented APIs.
I think if it would be kind of like backfire if we enforce a model where deprecation Like we cannot deprecate something without making it stable first, because we deprecate a lot of undocumented APIs. So that means we need to document them first before deprecation, which is kind of like how do you document something that's not even right?
I'm not saying that we need to document them as stable. I'm saying that adding them to the deprecation list is us acknowledging they're actually stable, and we won't land breaking changes except on several measures for this API.
I mean, they are stable. We never officially said that, but they are stable, and much of the ecosystem is relying on them. That's the short take.
Is the point that we are going to messages so that we are not we acknowledge that it was treated as stable, but we didn't bump the stability index, or
Well, we're gonna.
No, we don't have to. No, that's a different thing because, um, I mean, let me state the obvious. People don't care if we say that a feature is stable or experimental. If they see on the documentation, they're gonna spam it. Period. They're gonna use it no matter how we state it is. Okay. So it does not really matter to them if we first bump them to stable and then we dop deprecate and then we runtime deprecate. Unless they doesn't break their code, they don't care. Period. That's something that we're just agreeing on our process, which probably for the future we say we can't keep a module on the experimental list for 2 years, especially if we see wide adoption. We say this should probably have been bumped as stable, but maybe incomplete, whatever. That's something you can document long ago. Now it's too late to do that. I agree that we should probably treat this as a stable module, even though we're never going to say it was stable at all, but we just can't remove it. Otherwise, tomorrow everybody will be broken, including myself for the record. So that's mine and probably, I guess, Antoine's take here.
Yeah, something can be experimental, and then we can have breaking changes outside of the sample measure, or it can be deprecated, and which is the same as stable when it comes to sample. Does that make more sense?
yeah, I agree. It's like there's like de facto stable, but we do not want to treat it as stable because we
Yeah.
are afraid of like that makes us no longer be able to break it. But we do want to like we are not sure like that kind of. But yeah, I guess the we still have a more actionable thing to discuss is whether we do want to accept the doc deprecate per request. Like, do Antoine still object to doc deprecate it? Do we need to go for a vote or something?
I guess I'm fine as long as we all agree, and maybe I can make a doc PR that states more clearly that something can either be experimental or deprecated. And if that's everyone is aligned on this, I don't mind having register being deprecated and de facto stable.
Chenjong?
Yeah, I think the wording about issuing a deprecation on an experimental API was that it's not necessary to issue a deprecation on an experimental API. It could be removed without a deprecation process. So I think if we are going to revert the documentation, we could say that deprecation could be issued either stable or experimental APIs, but experimental APIs could still be removed without deprecation process.
Well, my point is that something cannot be both experimental and deprecated. And like basically, I would like us to, if we agree on that, that's how we do things. It's either an experimental features is graduated to stable, either it's removed without a server commit, or it goes to deprecated, but it's treated then as stable. And yeah.
Richard?
Richard?
Yeah, so I was just looking, and so the experimental feature in the stability index and the public documentation. So this is not our process documentation. This is in the documentation that we put out in the API documentation. It says experimental features leave the experimental status typically either by graduating to stable or are removed without a deprecation cycle. So there is still some woolliness about, actually imaging
Typically.
deprecations, but it's basically saying that if it's experimental, it can be removed without a deprecation cycle. And I think we agree with that. It's just does that then exclude any deprecation warnings or assignments?
I mean, so far from what I see, we have few modules which are in the experimental. I mean, two are totally deprecated, and I'm looking at 25. We have CEAs, SQLite, trace events, WASI, and Core. I mean, Corpac is going to be removed, and async hooks, so we don't even have a very long list. There is the VFS from Matteo, and me and Colin are actually working on FFI, so there might be another one soon. So we have a pretty good list of stuff to review. But anyway, sorry, Richard, you're next on the list.
I think
Sorry, forgot to put my hand down.
I think what we can do is probably I'm not sure whether that was what Antoine was suggesting, was to clarify that, for example, experimental features can also be deprecated. We just clarify that it can be, and it was like some of the experimental feature had been deprecated in the past with code design. And also that in the deprecation part, we clarify that it's not limited to stable features because we do deprecate like undocumented stuff. Like not even experimental there, not even documented. So I guess unless there's any objections, we can probably just move on with the doc deprecation, and then maybe some clarification in the stability index to kind of clarify it. But things are done with a case by case basis. We don't we leave some wobbly room in case we want to make exceptional decisions.
Guess we can take it to GitHub.
Yep.
But I'm not really pleased with the idea that something can be both experimental and deprecated. I think we're sending mixed signal, and it'd be much better to make those things clearer.
I guess we can move the follow-on discussion to a GitHub pull request. For that modulator pull request in particular, are you still objecting to doc deprecated or?
And yeah, I'd like to have something like to clarify at least what would be the status. Is it still experimental or not if we deprecate it?
So do you think it should be blocked on a pull request to clarify the status, or should it go
I can
narrow? Or?
I can make a PR, doc PR, with how I think things should be, and if this PR gets blocked, or if we get an alternative PR, then we can rediscuss in the meeting. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
I'm okay with that, but do remember that we have a timeline. So this should, if we do want to deprecate module user, we should do it, like ideally do it before April.
Yeah.
Okay. We can move on to the next one. I don't think we have enough time to discuss the AI stuff.
We need another 3 hours for that, to be honest.
We need a Clovers or something. I guess we can defer until Matteo is in the meeting.
Probably, yeah.
There's also let me check if there's another item that we can discuss that's not like have been on the agenda forever. There's the update meeting schedule. Antoine, do you want to discuss it since you put it on the agenda?
It's for visibility. I think Europe is changing switching to summertime in Sunday, something like that. So we should find new meeting times probably to adjust.
Do you have the link to the spreadsheet? Because Yariz was asking, where is the spreadsheet?
I'll have to look. I'm not sure. Maybe it was Michael that was maintaining that.
Okay, I guess there's ample FYI. Just need someone to figure out where the spreadsheet is. And I think others probably need to take longer than what we have here. The others are all there's the encrypto updater script. Is there any update on that?
I think that we still need to get James and or Yegez on the call.
Right. And I think the rest need much longer than what we have here. There's also the Rust crate ownership issue.
I think that's waiting on your geek's action to create the team actually. There were 2 issues of it, and the discussion was in another issue to actually create the Rust team, and is waiting for your geek to actually create it. So we can probably remove this from the agenda, I feel like.
Okay, I removed the label. And I guess we can probably just wrap it up. Is there anything else that people think that we should address in this meeting? If not, I guess see you in another week, or I don't know. Okay, bye.
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 Cheers, folks.
Bye.